You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Challenge us at Wexford Insurances 0818 31 30 30.
Good morning. I'm Karl Fitzpatrick and it's business time here on Southeast Radio. Welcome to this week's edition of Business Matters. Okay, let's get straight down to business. On this week's agenda, I speak to Minister Brendan Howlin about a range of issues facing businesses right across the county. Wexford County Manager Adrian Doyle discusses a new initiative aimed at attracting Dublin businesses to Wexford. And Communications Consultant Orla Carmody provides us with information about a global business network that has recently launched in Ireland. If there's any particular topic you would like to hear covered on the show, feel free to email the details to businessmatters@southeastradio.ie. Earlier this week, I attended the launch of the Wexford Business Network in Dublin. After the event, I had the opportunity of speaking with Minister Brendan Howlin about a range of issues facing Wexford businesses. But I started by asking him for his thoughts on the Wexford Business Network, and this is what he had to say.
Well, I think that it's a fantastic initiative. I think it's important for people who want to do business in our county to have one access portal that they know if they have an idea to create jobs or if they want to explore the potential of siting a business in Wexford or growing a business out of Wexford, that there is one contact point available to it. And I know that that's the view of the Enterprise Office in the County Hall and the new LEO, the Local Enterprise Network, which is very important. So I applaud the initiative, I applaud those who are involved in it, and I want to give it every support that we can. There is a huge platform of Wexford people who want Wexford to thrive. And if you can pull all that strand of energy, all that capacity, all that brain power together, I think that when Ireland is emerging now from the doldrums of an economic recession, that Wexford will be well positioned to be to the forefront in our recovery.
You've taken infrastructure very seriously in your own plan over the last couple of years in relation to investing in Wexford. Talk us through some of the projects that you have planned over the coming years.
Well, the job I was given 2.5 years ago was to be Minister for Public Expenditure and also Reform. On the expenditure side, most of what I had to do is not pleasant. That is, we're working towards balancing the books because in the economic collapse, the income to the state fell by 30%. But the outgoings did not, so we're still borrowing. So we are working towards a balanced budget, but to supplement that, that was never a strategy that was sufficient in and of itself. We need an investment and a jobs strategy. So I've been working very hard to find off-balance sheet investments from the European Investment Bank, from our own domestic banks, from the Council of Europe Bank, to find the resources to invest in upgrading our built infrastructure, because there are many deficiencies still, particularly in relation to our own county. The unfinished motorway access, it only comes as far as Clough. We need to have the bypass of Enniscorthy and the bypass of New Ross in place, because it's an impediment for people accessing the business community in Wexford, and it's an impediment to exporters from Wexford. We also need to have proper broadband accessibility so that people can do more and more business online, because more and more people are doing business online, and that should happen in Wexford. I was determined that we're going to get natural gas. As energy prices become more challenging, energy becomes more and more one of the factors that people decide in terms of locating a business. Having natural gas in Wexford, and we will have it by the end of next year. We've campaigned for it for a long time. I was determined it would happen, and it will happen now. Makes the platform of Wexford much more attractive for large energy consumption businesses and sustaining businesses like Celtic Linen and Wexford Creamery and others that are already significant consumers of energy. So the port of Rosslare is something that always concerned me. It is a vital local and national infrastructure that in recent times has not been used to its optimum. We want to ensure that the port of Rosslare becomes a driver for economic activity. So that's just a flavour of what we want to do. We also want to meet the demand, the demographic demand for more schools places. So the building of the Loretta School, for example, the building of the replacement to supplement Gorey community college, the new Crea College, and so many other bits of education infrastructure are important. And that will happen as well.
They're all very, very important projects from a macro perspective. However, most of the business owners that I speak to on a daily and weekly basis, their big challenge is cash flow. What's the government doing to deal with that on their behalf?
Well, firstly, the SME sector was a pivotal part of the budget strategy last year. There were 10 individual actions laid out to help the SME sector. Some of those already rolled out, microfinancing, access to money and so on, the export guarantee. But you're right, the big issue that I hear from SMEs, from people trying to do business, there's two issues. One is the difficulty in getting paid, and two, the difficulty in getting rollover capital, even small sums of money from the banks. Now we need to put pressure on the banks to be lenders. That's their function, and that's not happening. So the government has called in the banks at the most senior level, have put pressure on them to provide money. And we're looking outside the capital pool of the banks. I've met with the European Investment Bank on numerous occasions the last 2 years, both in Brussels, but even in Dublin, where the entire board of the European Investment Bank came to Dublin to have a formal meeting. I met with President Hoyer there, and they are providing now very significant capital to the two pillar banks, Bank of Ireland and AIB, to lend to the SME sector. We have to make sure that that money is not only provided but is passed on.
Do you have the power to get the banks to loan money? That's the question, because we're hearing the same rhetoric over the last 2 years that we're putting the pressure on the banks to loan, but the SME business community don't see it happening.
Well, you see, the problem is that the banks are saying that they're lending. They're telling us as a government that the two pillar banks loaned $3 billion to the SME sector last year. And yet we have the SME sector telling us, well, if they are, we can't see it because we can't get access to it. So we need to get to the bottom of that, and we've asked the financial regulator to ensure that that promise is kept, and we're calling them in to give account of themselves directly to us. So yes, there is a bit of further leveraging to be done, and we of course own the majority shareholding in one of the banks, which is AIB. They certainly can be hugely influenced by us. We have a small holding in Bank of Ireland, but they too can be put under influence because they've had a significant capital investment from the state. It is a job of work to constantly grind them into a position where that they are doing what is necessary and providing loans where they're needed. Now, they have to be obviously prudent in the loans. They're not going to give money where it can't be repaid. They have a prudential responsibility to their own shareholders, the people who are putting their deposits in banks. But that said, they're certainly not stepping up to the plate in playing their role in the economic regeneration that is now required.
Construction was a huge employment sector within the Wexford community over the last 10 or 12 years. We've seen a huge amount of job losses in this sector, most of which will never come back again. Which sectors do you see growth happening in for those that were working in the construction sector to migrate into?
Well, firstly, as I said in the few words I spoke tonight, the construction sector was allowed in the bubble period to become 25% of GDP. It was never sustainable. Now, it has collapsed to an unsustainably low level now, so we need to grow it back to a level that is sustainable in the longer term. And that means the state investing in the projects I've talked about, and also the private sector investing again, bringing stability back to the housing market, because we're not building houses now. We need to do that into the future. And there'll be a number of other initiatives taken by the government, for example, to retrofit houses to ensure that they're energy sustainable. That will save money in terms of imported energy bills and save money to the dwellers in the house in terms of future cost of heating, but it will also create thousands of jobs in the short term. But outside of that, we also need to look at the new sectors. Obviously, tourism is an important sector of itself. The environmental sector in Wexford, because we have the Environmental Protection Agency, I think there is capacity to look at alternative energy generation. Why not make Wexford a hub for that? The food industry is hugely important for Wexford. There are a number of value-added companies a huge range of them already in Wexford, but we can do an awful lot more. So the technology sector, the food sector, capitalising on our agricultural base, and also regenerating to some extent the construction sector itself. They will all play, I think, an important part in our regeneration.
That interview was recorded earlier this week in Dublin at the launch of the Wexford Business Network. We're going to take a short commercial break now. After the break, communications consultant Orla Carmody will be providing us with information about a new global business network which is recently launched in Ireland. We'll be right back.
You're listening to South East Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Think Wexford Insurances for your business insurance.